Imagine applying for family insurance on a typical Saturday morning, only to stumble upon a secret that would change everything you thought you knew about your marriage. David Miller, a devoted husband and father, believed he had it all: a loving wife, Emily, and their bright-eyed 5-year-old son, Ethan. Life in their quiet suburban neighborhood was simple and predictable. But that illusion was shattered the day David walked into the insurance office to finalize a routine family policy. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just some signatures, a brief consultation, and he'd be on his way. But the insurance agent mentioned a standard DNA verification to prevent fraud, especially for child coverage. David agreed without hesitation, never imagining it would lead to anything more than an added layer of security for his family. A week later, a thick envelope arrived from the insurance company. David, expecting dull paperwork, tore it open without a second thought. But as his eyes scanned the document, his heart stopped. Ethan's DNA didn't match his. At first, he thought it was a mistake, a clerical error. It had to be. But the details were clear and precise, leaving no room for doubt. His mind raced. How could this be? Ethan was his son. He had to be. David remembered the day Ethan was born, the overwhelming joy of holding him for the first time. The countless nights he had rocked him to sleep, the scraped knees he had bandaged, the bedtime stories whispered in the dark. Was all of that a lie? David felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His first instinct was to confront Emily, demand an explanation, but a voice in the back of his mind urged caution. If this was true, if Emily had betrayed him, a hasty confrontation could cost him everything. He needed to be strategic. If he wanted to protect Ethan, he had to gather proof. Cold, undeniable proof. That evening, David watched his family from across the dinner table with new eyes. Ethan chattered about his day at kindergarten, his little hands animated as he described a game he played with his friends. Emily laughed, her eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when she was genuinely happy. But to David, everything felt like a performance. He forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness rising in his throat. As days turned into weeks, David became a shadow in his own home, observing every interaction, every word. He replayed memories in his mind, searching for signs he might have missed. And soon enough, the cracks began to show. Late-night work meetings that seemed too frequent, hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room, and the subtle, almost imperceptible distance that had grown between them. David's mind raced with questions, but he resisted the urge to dig deeper immediately. He knew he had to be patient, to wait for the right moment. The truth was out there, and he was determined to find it, but not yet. First, he needed more than suspicion, he needed irrefutable evidence. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support truly means the world to us. David couldn't shake off the weight of the revelation. The knowledge that Ethan wasn't his biological son gnawed at his mind, but he masked his emotions, maintaining a facade of normalcy at home. He knew confronting Emily immediately could jeopardize his chances of understanding the full truth, and possibly losing Ethan forever. Instead, he chose a quieter, more calculated approach. As days turned into weeks, David found himself spiraling into a vortex of memories. Every small argument, every unexplained late night, every distant look from Emily resurfaced in vivid detail. He had been blind, or maybe he had chosen to be blind, to all the signs that now screamed betrayal. But he needed more than just suspicion, he needed proof. One evening, as Emily sat in the living room engrossed in her favorite TV show, David retreated to the quiet of their bedroom, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what he was looking for exactly, but his instincts told him that the answers were closer than he thought. He began by revisiting the timeline of their relationship, trying to piece together the moments where things might have gone wrong. He recalled their college days, the carefree laughter, the late-night study sessions, and the tight-knit group of friends they once had. But amidst those memories, he couldn't help but think about the people from their past. Had someone from those days resurfaced in Emily's life? David's mind kept circling back to the subtle changes in Emily's behavior. She was more secretive, often glued to her phone, and there were times when she would step out to take calls, claiming they were work-related. But David knew better. Something wasn't right. One night, when Emily had gone out for a girls' night, David found himself unable to resist the urge to investigate further. He knew snooping wasn't something he would normally do, but these were not normal circumstances. He wasn't ready to confront her without solid proof. David decided to check their phone records. As the primary account holder, he had access to their call history. He logged into the account and scrolled through the recent activity. His heart raced as he noticed frequent calls to an unsaved number. The calls were often late at night or during times when Emily claimed to be busy with work. David jotted down the number, his mind racing with possibilities. Who was she talking to so often and so secretly? The frequency and timing of the calls were suspicious enough to confirm that something was amiss. But without knowing who was on the other end of the line, he couldn't jump to conclusions. Over the next few days, David kept a close eye on Emily's behavior. She seemed more guarded with her phone, often stepping out of the room to take calls or texting with a secrecy that hadn't been there before. David's heart ached with every passing day, but he knew he needed to be patient. He had to gather enough evidence to confront her in a way that she couldn't deny. Late one night, unable to sleep, David sat in the darkened living room, staring at the piece of paper with the mysterious phone number. He considered calling it, but he wasn't ready for that step yet. Instead, he decided to wait, to observe, and to gather more information before making his move. As David lay in bed that night, pretending to be asleep as Emily quietly slipped in beside him, he felt a growing sense of resolve. The betrayal was undeniable, but his love for Ethan was unwavering. No matter what happened next, David knew one thing for certain: he would fight for his son, even if the boy wasn't his by blood. The battle ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it head-on. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter their family forever, but David was determined to come out on the other side with the truth, and with Ethan by his side. The days following David's discovery of the mysterious phone number were a blur of tension and unease. Every interaction with Emily felt like walking on a tightrope, his mind constantly racing with questions he couldn't yet voice. But it wasn't just the phone calls that haunted him, it was the growing fear of what he might uncover if he dug deeper. One evening, while Emily was in the shower and Ethan was engrossed in his cartoons, David saw his chance. He picked up Emily's phone, which she had carelessly left on the kitchen counter, a rare lapse in her increasingly guarded behavior. His hands trembled as he unlocked it, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear anything else. He navigated to her photo gallery, his breath catching in his throat. The first few images were innocent, family pictures, holiday snapshots, and candid moments of Ethan playing in the yard. But as he scrolled further, his blood ran cold. There, hidden among the everyday memories, were photos of Emily with another man. They were too close, too familiar, and their smiles spoke of a connection far deeper than friendship. David's stomach churned as he recognized the man, Jason. The same Jason who had been their friend in college, the one Emily had always insisted was just a friend. The man David had trusted, had laughed with, had never once considered a threat. But the photos told a different story. In some, Emily and Jason were at a park, their hands brushing in ways that spoke volumes. In others, they were in a cozy-looking cafe, their heads leaned in close, sharing private jokes. And then there were pictures of Jason with Ethan, photos that made David's heart shatter into pieces. Jason lifting Ethan onto his shoulders, Jason helping him fly a kite, Jason's arm protectively around the boy. It was undeniable. Jason wasn't just a friend. He was Ethan's real father. David's mind raced back to their college days. He remembered how Emily and Jason had always been close, but he had never suspected anything more. He had been the one dating Emily, and eventually, he had been the one to marry her. But now, with this evidence in front of him, he wondered if their entire relationship had been built on a lie. His hands clenched into fists, and for a brief moment, he considered confronting Emily right then and there. But he stopped himself. He needed more. He needed to be absolutely certain before he accused her of such a betrayal. He quickly transferred the photos to his own phone and put Emily's device back exactly where he had found it. He spent the rest of the evening in a haze, barely able to focus on anything but the images burned into his mind. Over the next few days, David watched Emily with a new perspective. Every smile she gave him felt hollow, every affectionate gesture a cruel reminder of her deception. But he kept his cool, knowing that the time for confrontation would come, and when it did, he would be ready. He decided to dig deeper into Jason's life. Late at night, when Emily was asleep, David scoured social media, looking for any connection between Jason and Emily. What he found only confirmed his worst fears. There were posts from Jason's account, vague, cryptic updates about lost opportunities and the one that got away. But the most damning evidence was a recent post featuring Ethan's picture, captioned with a simple heart emoji. It was subtle, but to David, it screamed the truth. The betrayal was deeper than he had ever imagined. Not only had Emily cheated on him, but she had also kept this secret for years, letting him believe that Ethan was his son. The weight of that deception was almost too much to bear. But amidst the pain, one thing remained clear: David's love for Ethan hadn't changed. The boy was innocent in all of this, and David was determined to protect him, no matter what the truth revealed. The stage was set. David had the evidence he needed. Now, it was time to confront Emily and expose the lies that had been festering beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect family. David felt his heart pounding as he gathered all the evidence he had painstakingly collected over the past weeks. The photos, the phone records, and the undeniable truth about Ethan's parentage were all meticulously documented. The moment he had dreaded had finally arrived. It was time to confront Emily. But David wasn't just driven by anger, he was prepared for a battle that would play out not just in their home but in the courtroom. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, David summoned the courage to face Emily. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. "Emily," David's voice was steady but cold, "we need to talk." Emily looked up, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" David laid the photos on the coffee table, each one a damning piece of evidence. Emily's face paled as she saw the images, her with Jason, and even more incriminating, Jason with Ethan. "What is this?" David's voice cracked slightly, the pain seeping through. "How long has this been going on?" Emily's eyes darted from the photos to David's face. She opened her mouth to speak but then snapped it shut. After a tense silence, she finally said, "You're crazy, David. This doesn't mean anything." But David wasn't buying it. "Don't lie to me, Emily. I know Ethan isn't my son. I have the DNA results." Emily's face twisted with a mix of fear and defiance. "You're making a big mistake, David. If you think you can take Ethan away from me, you're wrong. I'll make sure the court knows what kind of man you really are." David's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Emily stood up, her voice rising. "I'll tell them you've been abusive. That you hit me when you're drunk. They'll believe me. You'll lose everything." David was stunned. He had never laid a hand on Emily, and the thought of her fabricating such lies was a blow he hadn't anticipated. But he wasn't going to back down. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice firm. "I have something you can't deny." Determined to protect himself and Ethan, David scheduled another DNA test, this time to confirm something that had been nagging at the back of his mind. The results were both shocking and liberating. David was infertile. he could never have fathered a child. With this irrefutable evidence in hand, David took Emily to court. The proceedings were tense, with Emily painting David as a violent, abusive husband. She cried on the stand, detailing fabricated stories of drunken rages and physical assaults. But David remained calm, knowing he had the truth on his side. When it was his turn to speak, David presented the court with the DNA test results, both proving Ethan wasn't his biological son and confirming his infertility. The courtroom fell silent as the weight of the evidence sank in. "Your Honor," David said, his voice steady, "I've loved Ethan as my son since the day he was born. But the betrayal I've faced from my wife is beyond anything I could have imagined. She's not just lied to me, she's trying to destroy my life with false accusations. I ask for justice, not just for me, but for Ethan." The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, the truth impossible to ignore. Emily's lies unraveled in the face of the undeniable facts. The verdict was swift. Emily was found guilty of perjury and attempting to manipulate the court with false accusations. She was sentenced to jail, her facade finally shattered. David felt a wave of relief but also a profound sadness. The woman he had loved had betrayed him in the worst possible way, but through it all, his love for Ethan remained unchanged. He knew the battle wasn't over yet, he still had to fight for custody of the boy he considered his son. As Emily was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, David took a deep breath. The worst was behind him, but the future still held its own set of challenges. He was ready to face them, for Ethan's sake. The courtroom had fallen silent, the echoes of Emily's sentencing still hanging heavy in the air. David stood motionless, his heart pounding not from victory but from the weight of what had been lost. The truth had prevailed, but at a price none of them could have anticipated. As Emily was led away in handcuffs, her eyes darted to David's, not with remorse, but with a cold, defiant glare. Yet, none of that mattered to David anymore. His focus was solely on Ethan. The next challenge was one David hadn't fully prepared for, the custody of a child who wasn't biologically his. As he stood before the judge, the gravity of his emotions became overwhelming. He had loved Ethan from the moment he first held him, and no DNA test could unravel the bond they had forged over 5 years. "Your Honor," David began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I know Ethan isn't my biological son. But that doesn't change how much I love him. I've been his father from the day he was born. I've watched his first steps, heard his first words, and been there for every scraped knee and bedtime story. I don't want to lose him because of a mistake that wasn't his fault." The judge listened intently, nodding as David continued. "Ethan doesn't know any other father. I don't want him to grow up feeling abandoned or unloved. I am prepared to do whatever it takes to give him the life he deserves. Please, let me be the father he needs." There was a pause, a heavy, heart-wrenching silence, before the judge finally spoke. "Mr. Harris, your dedication to Ethan is commendable. The court recognizes that family is not solely defined by biology but by love, care, and commitment. In light of your unwavering devotion and the best interest of the child, the court grants you full custody of Ethan." Relief flooded through David, tears welling in his eyes as he realized that despite all the betrayal and heartache, he wouldn't lose the one thing that mattered most. He left the courthouse holding Ethan's small hand, feeling a mix of sorrow and gratitude. The battle was over, but the journey ahead was just beginning. Life as a single father wasn't easy. The absence of Emily's presence in their home was palpable, and there were moments when Ethan would ask about his mother. David chose honesty, explaining that sometimes adults make mistakes, but it didn't mean they loved their children any less. He never spoke ill of Emily, believing that Ethan would form his own understanding in time. David threw himself into being the best father he could be. He adjusted his work schedule, ensuring he was there for school drop-offs, soccer practices, and bedtime stories. Their home, once filled with tension and secrets, now echoed with laughter and warmth. David made it his mission to create new memories, ones untainted by betrayal. As the years passed, David watched Ethan grow into a kind, curious, and resilient boy. Every milestone, from losing his first tooth to learning to ride a bike, was a testament to their unbreakable bond. David knew that the scars of the past would never fully disappear, but they were overshadowed by the love and trust they rebuilt together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to David and asked, "Dad, will you always be here for me?" David smiled, pulling Ethan close. "Always, buddy. No matter what." In that moment, David realized that family wasn't defined by the blood that ran through their veins, but by the love that filled their hearts. And for David, that love was more than enough.